Hello and welcome to Tabletop Oddity. My name is Jay, and today I want to talk about a possible power creep in Star Wars Legion. Now, for those of you who don't know what I mean by that, a power creep is essentially when your new releases are stronger than the old releases. Now, people will very cynically say that that's because a company will want you to buy the new stuff rather than their old stuff, right? But I do think there are some less cynical reasons why you might end up with a bit of a power creep, and we'll talk about those. But before we do all that, if at the end of this video you like the video, press like, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do. It really does help if you're interested in like Star Wars Legion and stuff. And yeah, so what am I talking about? Power creep. I just mentioned what a power creep is. There's some examples of why it might be relevant, and some examples why it might not be relevant. When you look at like the competitive list right now, a lot of the units that are getting used are from like Wave 1 and 2. Yeah, we were having Stormtroopers, we're having Vias. You know, we've got Rebel Troopers. They're all like, literally, when the game came out, a lot of those units are still used as of now and are still strong. So like power creep, what are you talking about? There is no power creep. Yeah, right. I thought in some you could agree. I could agree with that. You know, like I do agree with that. I think that's the case. There has been recent examples of perhaps a slight power increase, and I think maybe he like tauntauns in comparison to say speeder bikes. Some people say Shore Troopers into Stormtroopers, but I'd have to see the Shore Troopers. They are more expensive, so it's hard to really like quantify that. But one like I say egregious example of this has been the vehicles, right? So we've had the new Clone Wars vehicles, and it's hard to not say that the new Clone War vehicles are better than the old vehicles, right? And I'm not even talking about the Airspeeder. The Airspeeder is absolute. I mean, I've got it here. I'm not even paint. I never paint it. Sorry, the light is like super bright here, but the Airspeeder is not even in consideration here. So let's look at the ATST, right? The ATST, armor, 11 wounds, 8 resilience, white defense dice. So a 2 with the surge, so a 2 in 6 save. You've got armor though, so that save is, you know, not bad considering you've got armor. 11 wounds as well. You're like, oh, boom, 175 point size. Arsenal 2, but you don't by default come with a ranged weapon. You need to like spend money and get another one there. I'm losing my voice. I do apologize. You can tell. So let's compare that to the new vehicles, the Clone Wars vehicles, right? Again, same kind of price, 175. Now this one does have AI attack. The Republic one does not. Now, it's hard to argue that this isn't better. It's got 9 wounds instead of 11, fine. It's got red defense dice, so a 3 in 6 save. But the fact that you've got armor, that's a significant boost. Yes, it's less resilient, 6 out of 8. 6 instead of 8, but you've also got 2 less wounds, so it's literally a proportionate less. By default, you come with 2 ranged weapons, so straight out of the block, you can actually shoot with both of them at range 2. You've got Barrage as well, which is a cool, interesting ability. You know, there's a couple of stuff there. Yeah, you've got weak points, rear, and etc. But I think overall, most people will agree at the moment that these tanks are, these vehicles are probably better than, say, like the ATST, the Airspeeder, etc. Yeah, I think it's almost unarguable. I think it's slightly better at least, and more likely to see use. Now, they have tried to upgrade, like, previous vehicles by we got the new tanks and we had new pilots and that kind of stuff, and it just never really it didn't really materialize the way we wanted. The new tanks have seen use, like the new tank and the land speeder, but the new pilots didn't really affect the ATST in the way that a lot of people was hoping, right? And it's hard to argue that one's not better. The new ones aren't better than the old ones, but I don't think that this is necessarily malicious, and I think this is the important bit. As I said, a lot of the old stuff is still usable, and the only reason that I think you might see this is because of the way that you would design this kind of stuff, right? So let's accept that they made the Airspeeder, and it wasn't very good to say, like, let's say the average is here. They made the Airspeeder, right? And it wasn't getting played because everything else was just more cost-effective and better. Right, we all accept that. Then you come to make a new vehicle. What do? Well, you try and balance it not with the Airspeeder, you try and balance it with everything else. So then that looks better. Do you know what I mean? So you make it better, but you make it actually cost effective, and the old things look not cost effective. Now, obviously, the Airspeeder is the extreme example, and the ATST is probably much closer. But I think that's all it is. I honestly think that these examples that we're seeing are probably just fine-tuning points and ratios and that kind of thing. I think it's them trying to get to here. Now, the reason power creep would happen naturally after that is, well, imagine you make something new, but you make it above the average. Well, now what do? Because you can't. There's in the moment, apart from like an errata, there is no way of knocking down something unless you bring in a new unit which counters that unit or something. But by default, you can't like oh, we'll increase the points, or we'll make it worse without a significant errata. It just lingers there at the top. Maybe like snipers, whatever you want to say, very cost-effective units. So what do? Do you then just slightly increase everything up to that level so that they become the norm? But the problem is, if you do that, what if you then make something else that goes above it? You end up with this repeated cycle of trying to balance things. Now, it's not an FFG problem. It's not like only FFG are suffering from this slight minutiae of misbalances that end up with power creeps or what have you. I think FFG are doing a great job of not having this happen. It's just something that can happen, I think. And it does happen across other games, for sure. What is the solution? Well, I don't think there actually is a solution to that. Inevitably, if you can't go back and rectify things, either with a stronger errata, which they obviously don't want to do for too many things, then there's only a certain amount of ways you can fix stuff. Pilots, upgrades, that kind of thing. Yes, they do that. We're seeing the operative Vader and Luke, because it looks like the operative Vader will have like command cards that are useful for Vader. Let's call him Vader Prime because it sounds cool. Vader Prime. If that's the case, that makes Vader worth it now. Cool, right? That is a good way of doing things. But ultimately, there are certain things that are going to be like almost impossible to fix, and that's maybe the snipers, maybe they're just too cheap, and maybe the airspeeder is just too expensive for what it is, right? And I'm of the belief that the only proper way to fix this is a point app. I think it's the only way to make it so that everything will get a reasonable amount of use on the table. And even that, like even in X-Wing, they consistently change these points every 3-6 months. It's not like they nail the points and go, right, boom, done. Because inevitably people find the most like efficient product, efficient units, efficient characters, etc. So there's no long, like even that, it's a long-term fix, but you'll probably end up with that. You'll end up with like a rotation where your ATST is useful for 6 months, but then maybe it's not because something else has become better. That's if you're at the top end of competitive. By the way, if you're not interested in like super competitive stuff, as long as you don't try and abuse things, like all in abuse, and you're just playing with your friends, none of this really matters. You can just buy the cool stuff, and the game is very much balanced enough that two people who could never have met each other could very easily buy 2 armies for Star Wars Legion, like one each, play each other and at the same point level, and have a decent-ish game. Now, there are certain things where it's like, don't take the iron weapons on the Rebel Troopers, but then if vehicles are back, maybe they're back on the menu as well. But, there are certain examples where it's like, oh, that's not cost-effective at all. But really, they'll be able to have a fun game and then like slightly improve it without going super competitive. So if you are like a casual player, then these balance issues are less relevant for you, I reckon. But if you're interested in like competitive and tournaments, then it's not great to maybe have to see like somebody's going to buy 2 tanks, 6 stormtroopers, just min-max it exactly. Like, we don't want it where the lists are all the same. But I'm saying that, right? But as I'm saying, Legion hasn't been like that. We've had certain lists that are better. Luke Leia has been better. Via's Bubba was fantastic for a long time and still is pretty great, but now Bosk is in. We've not had a massive power creep, so like I don't want to come on here and be like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening to Star Wars Legion. We're having such a power creep. Like it's not really the case. But there are just going to be a few examples where if you take them in isolation, you're going to be like, well, that looks weird. And there's almost no arguing that. There is arguing, as I said, there's that natural balancing act. But you've also got to take these things in, not in isolation. So an ATST is an Imperial vehicle. The Imperials have different commanders, different core troopers, different everything. than say like the Separatists. The Separatists have different commanders, different core troopers, and they may not be 100% balanced if you look at them like as a direct comparison. You might think one's better than the other, but you've got to look at the rest of the faction. Like, so like, you know, the Imperials didn't have jump when the game came out. You had like really fast Luke versus really slow Vader. So when they added Boba Fett with jump and speed, it really changed the Imperial faction like into what it could do, kind of thing. And that's because they didn't balance it in as comparative stuff between, say, like Boba Fett and Han. It was balanced factionally. Now, as I said, they might. I'm not saying it's easy. They might get things wrong. I'm of the opinion that the only proper way to balance this long term is a points app. But I think I don't look at this game and think that they're maliciously having a power creep. I think it's probably just this natural balance. When they make things, they try and make it balanced, and sometimes they'll get it right, and sometimes they'll get it wrong. I think that's inevitable. And then when they do get it wrong, they're like, well, we'll learn from our mistakes and try and correct it. And then it's like, well, no, you've just made something that's stronger than your old stuff. Why? And, you know, it's because we're trying to balance it this time. There you have it. That's my opinion on the power creep. I don't think it's anything serious. As I said, a lot of the old stuff is still very much usable. And I suspect going into the Clone Wars, Stormtroopers and Rebels and stuff like that will still easily be able to compete with the Clone Wars factions. So there you have it. That's my view on a possible power creep, which I think isn't necessarily a massive issue. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have a most beautiful day. I'm going to possibly go rest my voice, except I am doing a battle report of Warcry later, so that's going to be interesting. Have a beautiful day, though, and goodbye.